Alright, with the layers, this is fairly new. Like I said, the structural items is what's all new. These are the same as they've always been. On the second page, you'll have dimension notes, etc. This is what you're going to use for all your dimensions, notes, tags, room names, all those items based on scale. So if you had a plan at 1/8 inch equals a foot scale, then you would want to use 1 to 8 dims, 1/8 inch. That's the scale. 1/8 equals a foot. These are all architecturally based. That's what this explains up here. So it'd be 1/8 inch equals a foot dims, 1/8 inch equals a foot notes, tag, room name, so on and so forth. So you can use those and the colors associated with those. There will be architectural layers from time to time that are thrown in there because that's the way the world works, and we'll talk about that when it happens. But they will be here, so you'll know what they are. But for right now, we're going to focus on these structural layers. And I just want to explain a couple of things to you. They're all going to begin with S to designate that they are structural layers. And for instance, concrete in this setting has 4 different ones. I have S concrete 4 times. And then the last part is specifically what part of the concrete we're talking about. This layer would be used for a face or an edge. So in other words, if I'm looking at a plan, the edge of the slab. Face would be like if you're looking at an elevation of a concrete wall. Well, you'd see the face of the wall. So that would be, it's part of the concrete that you see, that you can physically see the edge of. Okay, it's not buried in the dirt, it's not hidden from your view. So this is the color and line type associated with it. This one's pretty easy. The footings from, say, a plan view, we talked about that during the last video. If you have the footings, they're shown as hidden lines. And this actual layer is called footings hidden, meaning that these are the footings and they're hidden from my view. You can have a footing that's not hidden from your view. That would be in a section. When you cut a section through it and you're looking at that particular, sorry about that, and you're looking at that particular footing in a section, then it's not hidden from your view anymore. You're looking at it. Then it becomes a face or an edge because you see it. So this is going to be mainly used in plan views. Okay. Control joints and expansion joints, those will be labeled. If you have control joints, then they'll have their own layer. If you have expansion joints, they'll have their own layer. These should ring a bell from construction materials. Cutting plane, it's just kind of a generic one, but it has a S prefix on it because of when we call out a section, when we have the cutting plane line with the little circle in the section that calls out, you know, hey, go look at detail 2 on sheet S3 or whatever. We want to use this cutting plane layer for those, so they're on their own layer, so we can turn them on and off when we need to. So this is for your section lines where you're cutting making the little bubble and the detailed reference. That's what we want to use those for, because technically they're called cutting planes. And then inside the concrete, this one's a little bit out of order, but it's the reinforcing, the steel. And this could be rebar, it could be wire mesh, any type of reinforcing that we have in the concrete. Right here we got a note, use polylines and donuts to create actual thicknesses. What I want you to do is use a polyline, and in the properties of a polyline you can tell it how thick you want it. And with a donut, again, you can set the center diameter to 0, and on that donut set the outside diameter to whatever diameter you need for that particular rebar. For instance, number 4 bar. Hopefully you remember from materials that a number 4 bar is 4/8 of an inch in diameter, so it's a 1/2 inch in diameter. So when I draw that particular rebar, if it's labeled as such, which it will be, then we need to use a donut, make the center diameter 0, make the outside diameter 1/2 inch. That way it's the actual diameter of that rebar. Same way with the polyline. If I'm showing a piece of rebar running horizontally left to right on my screen, and we'll look at some of these in a minute, I want to make sure the thickness of that is a 1/2 inch. Sorry about that again. And so we'll look at those on plans in a minute. If you're using break lines, again, you know, where an object ends and you're cutting it off and not showing the full length of it, has its own layer. Hatching, structural hatching. When we get to steel and wood columns, we'll have a column layer, column grid layer. We'll talk about that. We talked about it a little bit last time. Beams and girders, joist bridging. All these things are going to come up with steel. later on. Here we have a wall, structural wall. NLB is non-load bearing, LB is load bearing. And so based on what type of wall it is, and we'll talk about it again when that time comes, we'll have our own layers. And then working lines, we'll talk about that with steel as well. And then just a couple of notes down here to clarify things. So that's a rundown of the layers in general. And this one is important. There may be layers that need to be created for a job or for a project that aren't on this list, and that's fine. Just make sure to give it the S prefix, dash, whatever you're going to call it, and then use these items right here for your desired thickness. So if it needs to be a thin line, then use green or magenta and just name it whatever it needs to be named. And that's all you really have to do. So just make sure that you do that, and if you need to add them, that's great. It's not a big deal, but just make sure that they have the S prefix and they have a color that is appropriate for what you're wanting to show. So if you have any questions, again, let me know. And now we're going to go into the actual plans for the project. Okay, this is the first sheet for project 1. As you can see, it is just the plan view of the slab, of the concrete slab. It is sheet S1.1, that's what we're going to call it. In this first project, and probably the second, we're going to be missing some sheets. I'm just giving you what you need. And so the sheet numbers are not necessarily that important, but just call them what they have on the sheet, because there's going to be detailed references, such as right here, that we need to be able to locate. So just keep the sheet names what they are, even if there are some missing. Don't worry about it. This is a very basic plan, and we're going to look at a few things just to kind of make sure that we're all on the same page again. This is the foundation plan. It is 1/8 inch equals a foot scale. You can see obviously we have dimensions, and just to call out some of the, going back to the layers, this right here, this little line circle with this reference in it, of course, that would be a section that's cut through this slab right here at this point. This would be referencing that S cutting plane layer. This is technically a cutting plane. That's where we're cutting this and creating the section. This, of course, is the section number. It's detail number 2, and it's on sheet S3.1. So this is an example of where you use that cutting plane layer that we talked about. This right here, these two dark line, or two continuous lines right here, and this line here coming over this, that's an example of the concrete face edge layer. That's the edge of the concrete slab. I can see it. The dashed line, of course, is the footing that I can't see. It's underneath the whole slab. Okay. Here's a CJ. That's a control joint. So all these little lines running back and forth, crisscrossing, are control joints. And of course, we have dimensions, and these, even though they're not really labeled, this is to the center line of that footing. So this is to the center point of that footing. Technically, really, they should have a line extended probably about that long, maybe a little longer. That is a center line, so that we can see it as a center line, so we know for sure where it's going. But that's basically, how it should be done. With structural plans, just like we looked at on that last little set we looked at, they can get a little busy. It's just a bunch of lines, but you have so many crisscrossing, and that's why it's important to use the right layers, because all these control joints here, when you have all these control joints, these lines are going to be lighter lines. According to my layers, they're going to be red, which for me, if you use the Brister layers, which I need to make sure I put that CTB file up in on the references module. If you don't have it, you're going to need it. If you need help with that, as far as how to use the CTB files and what they are and all that, please let me know. We went over that in intermediate, but we need to make sure that you got that, because it's very important that you use my layers and my plot style table, or it's not going to look right, and that'll result obviously in a lower grade. But the control joints will be a lighter line than the rest of them, so even though they're on here and there's a bunch of them, they won't really stand out that much. Okay, this drawing that you're looking at actually is not very well drawn, because all the lines look kind of the same thickness, and that's not good. You can see because of that, they kind of start bleeding together and you get lost in it. but we're going to do a little better job of creating differences in the line thicknesses. There's not really any expansion joints to note in here on the plan, but you will see that pop up from time to time. That's basically all you have on this plan. What we're going to do is do this first, the foundation plan, some details, and then we're going to come back and add some columns to it and some other structural items. And then after that, we'll look at the actual roof framing and load-bearing walls and those sorts of things. To give you a little information about it, this is just a basic monolithic concrete slab. Again, you got all these footings crisscrossing through it to strengthen it. That's obviously done by the structural engineer. Every once in a while you'll see right here there's a line missing. I mean, it's pretty obvious that you just need to add another hidden line right there. That should be a hidden line for the footing, just like this one over here. So there may be a few things here and there that are left out or whatever, but just, if you have a question, let me know. Most of them will be pretty easy to figure out. If you do see something like this where it says SIM, that means similar, and you can see there's a few of these around. What that means is that this particular detail is similar to this actual number. So 10S3.1 may not look exactly like where this is cutting, but it's similar to it. And most of the time when they say similar, they mean it's the opposite view. I mean, they drew it one way somewhere else, and now they're just showing you a reversed image of it. So it is similar, it's just reversed. And most of the time that's what that means. But that's pretty much it for the plan. It's very simple. Just follow the dimensions when laying it out. Everything should be fine. If you do have any questions, let me know. What we're going to do now is just look real quick at these details that are called out. We're going to look at S3.1, that particular sheet, and look at just a few of these details so you can see how they're drawn and how they relate to the layers.